In October 2011, a Philadelphia landlord told police something about his tenant just didn't sit right. She had demanded access to the basement, an unusual request, since most tenants rarely wanted anything to do with it. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the way she insisted, the way her eyes lingered sharp, cold, almost predatory, left him unsettled. When inspectors arrived to check things out, the door to the basement seemed to resist them, as if guarding a secret. They pried it open, hinges creaking into the silence. At first, there was nothing but blackness, a void, the kind of darkness that feels alive, thick, suffocating, pressing down on anyone who dares step inside. Then came the smell. It hit them in waves, rot, sweat, waste, human suffering all tangled together. A stench that clung to the throat, forcing them to gag, to hesitate. And then a sound, faint, almost too soft to notice. A shuffle, a whimper, something alive in the shadows. As their flashlights swept across the basement, shapes began to emerge. First, a filthy mattress. Then, the outline of chains glinting against the wall. And then, movement. They froze. The beams of light caught on faces. Not children, not quite adults. Just hollow-eyed figures crouched low, as if trying to disappear into the floor. Their bones jutted sharply beneath their skin, every rib visible. Their lips trembled, their wrists raw and bound. They weren't just hiding. They were prisoners. Prisoners who had been forgotten. The inspectors didn't breathe. They couldn't, because in that basement, they realized they weren't standing inside just another room. They had stepped into what the world would soon call the basement of horrors. For individuals, malnourished, weak, their faces were pale masks of suffering, eyes sunken deep into skulls that barely looked human anymore. Their minds were fogged with confusion, fear, and despair. They had been locked in this hell for months, maybe years. The days blurred into nights, and the nights stretched into eternity. In that basement, there was no dignity. Buckets served as toilets. They were forced to eat scraps that even a dog would have turned away from. Stale bread, spoiled leftovers, sometimes nothing more than uncooked noodles. Their skin was covered in sores from sleeping on filthy mattresses, crawling with insects. Every sound of a lock clicking shut reminded them of their prison. Every step overhead filled them with dread. Was it food? Or was it another beating? And yet, somehow, they survived. Not because the captors cared. Not because the conditions allowed it. They survived only because they had each other. Their whispered words in the dark, their trembling hands holding on, were the only threads keeping them tethered to life. But the question loomed larger than the basement itself. Why? Why were they here? Why had they been chosen? The woman behind the horror. Her name was Linda Weston. On the surface, she was ordinary, just another tenant, another face blending into the background of the city. She walked the same streets, bought groceries, smiled when she needed to. But behind that mask was something darker. Linda Weston was no ordinary criminal. She was a predator, a hunter who didn't stalk the strong, but the weak. Her prey? The vulnerable. Men and women with intellectual disabilities. People whose trust came easily, who believed promises of shelter, of food, of friendship. She offered them safety, a roof, a warm meal, a place to belong. But once they stepped into her world, they vanished. Their voices silenced, their freedom stripped away, their very identities erased. Weston took everything. Not just their bodies, kept in chains, hidden in basements. Not just their dignity, humiliated and broken daily. But their names, their records, their money. The motive was greed, pure and unrelenting. She, along with her accomplices Gregory Thomas and Eddie Wright, drained the victims' social security checks. Month after month, year after year, she collected money while they rotted in darkness. To Weston, they were not people. They were property, livestock, tools to fund her life. But the truth investigators would uncover was far more chilling. Because this basement, this dark, suffocating room of horror, was only one chapter in a saga that spanned years. And the trail Linda Weston left behind was littered with victims. Some who would never be found alive. As investigators dug deeper, a terrifying pattern emerged. This wasn't Linda Weston's first time. Not even close. Her crimes stretched back over a decade. She had crossed state lines, moving from city to city, always with the same chilling routine. Luring in the vulnerable, trapping them, and stripping them of everything. Victims were found in multiple states. Dozens of disabled men and women, some barely clinging to life, others already lost to the shadows of neglect. They were used, discarded, and replaced, as if they were pieces on a chessboard, pawns to keep her fraud alive. And then came the most chilling revelation of all. Police began to connect Weston to a series of suspicious deaths. Individuals who had once been in her care, now gone. People who were promised safety, but vanished without explanation. How many? No one could say for certain. How many checks had she cashed in their names? How many families never even knew the fate of their loved ones? The truth was unbearable. The numbers impossible to pin down. But one thing was clear. The basement in Philadelphia was only the tip of the iceberg. The trial. When Linda Weston was finally brought to justice, the courtroom was suffocating with tension. Every seat filled, every eye fixed on the woman at the center of it all. She sat there, stone-faced, cold, unmoved. There was no remorse in her eyes, no crack in her expression. Witnesses described her as manipulative, calculating, inhuman. Even her own family members testified against her. They had seen it too, her ability to charm, to deceive, to control. They spoke of a woman incapable of empathy, someone who saw people not as people, but as opportunities. Prosecutors presented the case like an avalanche. Charge after charge raining down. Kidnapping, racketeering, conspiracy, assault, fraud, murder. The list seemed endless, each word a reminder of another life broken, another soul consumed by her greed. And then, in 2015, Linda Weston made her final move. She pleaded guilty, not out of remorse, but to avoid the death penalty. Her punishment, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her accomplices, Gregory Thomas and Eddie Wright, would also spend decades behind bars. But the survivors? For them, justice could never erase what had been stolen. The aftermath, the discovery of that locked basement in Philadelphia, was more than just a news story. More than just another line in the annals of true crime. It was a wake-up call, a warning. It showed how easily the most vulnerable among us can be overlooked, ignored, forgotten. The victims had been hidden in plain sight, seen by neighbors, brushed past by strangers, yet failed by the very systems meant to protect them. Their ordeal was not just a crime, it was an indictment of neglect, a haunting story of captivity, exploitation, and the darkest depths of human greed. And though Linda Weston will never walk free again, the echoes of what she did still linger in that basement. Because the truth is this: sometimes, the greatest horrors aren't found in haunted houses, in ghost stories, or in legends whispered around campfires. They are real, they are human, and sometimes they are hiding right beneath our feet. To you listening, I leave you with this question: what would you do if your sibling confessed to this kind of crime? Would you help them or turn them in? Let us know in the comments. If the story stirred something in you, if it made you think about abuse, justice, or the fragile thread that holds people together, then don't let it stop here. Share this story so others can wrestle with it too. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing the stories that challenge comfort and demand we look closer. Then like this video not only because it is pleasant but because justice matters, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload.